What's up, everybody? My name is Andre Chapman Jr., and welcome to Chatting with Chapman. I'm your host. They call me Dre Made It Happen sometimes. And I have the pleasure of speaking with the 2015 Junior National All Around Champion, a four-time National All Around Silver Medalist in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2021, the most decorated athlete at the 2019 Pan American Games with four gold medals and one bronze medal, a 2020 Tokyo Olympian, the 2022 USA National All Around Champion, USA Gymnastics Athlete of the Year in 2022 and 2023, the first American rhythmic gymnast to win a silver medal and an all around medal at an FIG World Cup World Challenge Cup competition. She won 5 medals at the 2023 Pan American Games. She is the 2024 Grand Prix Brno final ribbon bronze medalist and a 2024 Paris Olympian. Please welcome Evita Griskenas. Did I say that correctly?
Griskenas, close.
Griskenas.
Um,
Griskenas.
Thank you so much. That was a really long intro. I don't think I've ever heard anyone like read a list out loud. So it puts things into perspective for me too, because I don't focus on the accomplishments as much, right? Because I'm very passionate about the craft itself. Although the accomplishments do mean a lot, and so thank you for listing it out.
Yeah, no, you are an amazing athlete. And, doing my research before this, it was awesome to get to learn and see it live on YouTube and just watch your performances. They're breathtaking.
Thank you. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Make them look super easy.
They do look super easy. It made me think that I can, go out there and try to do it, but, I know it would look nothing like how yours do.
I'm sure you could do a split.
I wish. I wish. Well, just to give you a little tidbit, I know we talked prior, but this podcast is meant to serve as a guidance for high school and younger athletes to learn from professional, collegiate, and elite athletes on their mental journey. My goal is to demystify mental performance and mental health, so athletes can start younger working and building and using the knowledge that's in these videos to better enhance their mental performance. So thank you as a future psychologist for being here today.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So my first question is, what mental skills have been crucial for you in the evolution and progression from a younger age to the Olympics?
Let's see. So I think the first and foremost thing that guides me is my faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. So having that foundation has always guided me and led me through hardships, and knowing that I always have that to fall back on, and not just to fall back on, but to lead and guide me is super important. But in more human terms,
Mhm.
I think for me, I've always been a huge journaler. And so writing out my thoughts, both the good, recollecting the good, and also the bad. I had an entire notebook at some point filled with just like, this is my angry notebook. Like, this is the like, I take the red pen and I just can barely write what I'm writing. But like, it's a very good way, I think, to sort through your thoughts, calm yourself down, regulate again your feelings and emotions, and then get back into what you're doing. um Sometimes you don't always have access to a notebook, let's say during training when you get really frustrated. So at that point, it's recognizing that you're getting frustrated, and then taking a step, going to the bathroom, taking a few deep breaths, and then maybe talking out loud to yourself, to really psych yourself back in, be like, I am upset about this. Okay, so that's over. I can move on to getting back into good training. So just building up those I guess habits of self-regulating is super important and crucial, and I think develops with age and time as you um, go on. And also, being a journaler, I also am a big type A, like time management
Mhm.
kind of person, and I think that's a very classic trait in athletes. Um, at least in the rhythmic world. I feel like if you do my sport, you have to be very technical. But making sure that you know what you're doing, when you're doing, even like a general schedule will help reduce some of that anxiety of like, when am I going to be able to fit in my homework? When am I going to be able to fit in my, like mental like break, relaxing, resting time and practice and all of that.
Yeah, yeah. I love what you said about your faith. And I just wanted to touch on that because performance is also very spiritual. And that's something that has not been spoken about on the podcast yet, just about the spiritual aspect of performance and having that faith. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Sure. Oh boy, you might need to like re-guide me onto some rails here because I can go on many tangents.
Yeah.
Um, I think I like to look at my journey as being divinely inspired because I saw rhythmic gymnastics on TV when I was 4, and I absolutely fell in love with the sport. And I asked my mom to take me, and at first she tried to take me to artistic gymnastics, which is the Simone Biles gymnastics. And she said she's never been more embarrassed because I crossed my arm, took one look around, went, "This is the wrong gymnastics," and refused to do anything until she took me to rhythmic. And so I started my journey when I was 4. And I've faced so many hardships. I wasn't like the kid who was winning medals left and right as a kid. Um, I remember being like, I'm going to go to the Olympics. I was 12. I was watching the Olympics and I was like, I'm going to be there. And there was just this like such calm assurance that I was going to be there. And I can only describe that feeling as being divine, that the Lord had placed a path for me. And then if we take a look at it from a trajectory standpoint, in 2016, I was a first year senior. It was my first real chance to qualify to the Olympics. And guess what? I didn't, you know? And that was like a moment of revelation, right? Where it's like, I feel it deeply that I'm going to go. And I made a promise. I was like, I'm going to go to Tokyo. And I didn't know how or what it would really take or what the journey would look like. I just knew that I would be there, right? And a lot happened. We know COVID happened. There was a
Mhm.
lot of uncertainty and et cetera, et cetera. I was in high school trying to figure things out. Then I competed in Tokyo. And after Tokyo, I started university. My university was Columbia University in New York, but my training was in Chicago. So I remember sitting there and I was like, I don't feel done. I know I really want to compete in Paris and I feel like there's something more. And I remember sitting in my dorm room crying and praying and being like, God, how in the world does this work? And the answer was do both and you'll be successful. And it was like, well, how? And it was just do it, right? And it'll work out. And a lot of my journey from, I'd say, 21 to 24 has been very spiritually heavy. It required a lot of faith and trust, realizing that perseverance is what's that? It's Romans 5, 3 to 5. If you give me like 2 seconds, I can like look it up. But
Take
the
your time.
premise
Yeah, go
is
ahead. Go ahead.
okay, I'll look it up real quick because I think it's a very important quote that has kept me going through all time. And again, I don't know if you're gonna edit this or not, but
Mm. I'm only going to edit it if you would like me to edit it, but this is
no,
great.
you're good. It's just again, there's a lot of tangents I can go on here, so I don't want people to get bored. Oh, but here it is. So it's but we also exalt in our tribulations, knowing that tribulation brings about perseverance, and perseverance proven character, and proven character hope. And hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out within our hearts through the Holy Spirit, who was given to us. And in 21, I had a lot of people say, I don't know how you're going to do both. You can't do both. It's not possible. You should quit gracefully while you can. This is the beginning of your end. And I just had this vision. I had this promise that things were going to work out, even though I didn't know how, and they did. And then in 2023, during the most important year, the qualification year, I broke my foot.
Wow.
Um, so it was a building stress fracture, I guess. It got misdiagnosed on an MRI in May, and then in June, I competed at the Pan American Championships where I had to basically our total score would give us the full team spots to go to Olympic qualifications and the World Championships, and then at the Pan American Games. And so I sucked it up the first 2 days. We made it through, qualified the full team. Um, and then on the third day, I walked out and I landed my first jump in my hoop. This is already finals day. And I just knew I broke my foot like fully. And I was like, in shock. I was just kind of like, ow. And then at that point, it was go, go, go. And I'm telling you, the Lord just took me through that routine because there was absolutely no way. Because after that routine, I crawled off the carpet, fell behind the curtain, just started sobbing because I couldn't stand on my foot.
Oh
So the
my
fact that
God.
I finished that entire routine and people couldn't really tell that something was wrong, um, was incredible. And then I got bronze too,
Wow.
which was a cherry on top.
Wow.
But that started a lot of, okay, I have Olympic qualifications in June, in 2 months. Um, how? So I had to go non-weight bearing. I had to do a lot of physical therapy, a lot of cross training, didn't actually practice my sport that much. And the Lord actually like sped up my recovery. I mean, the predicted stay off of your foot would be like 3 months, right? But he healed it enough that it was strong enough for me to go work on it, even if it was still a little bit cracked. And so from there, I competed in the World Championships. I did very, very well, but that wasn't enough to qualify. And so the last chance to qualify was through the Pan American Games in November, to which there was a lot that went on in between there, and that meant that there was only one spot to qualify the United States between North and South America available. And I won out by, I think, 1 or 2 tenths.
Wow.
So, yeah. And the entire time, I didn't know my standings. I didn't know um, my spot, like in terms of like ranking. I just knew that I was going to go out there and do what I was supposed to do. And that, I had this promise from the Lord that it will work out and just to keep that faith in him. And when we finished, my coach hugged me and she was like, that's it, it's up to God at this point. And the person who came in second basically was competing after me. So I really didn't even know then. Um, Again, from a human perspective. But then after that, I qualified to the Olympics. It's like, yay, let's
Wow.
go. Paris. The foot was still kind of broken. So, in order to be in at least health for Paris and also longevity looking beyond Paris, I needed to get off the foot completely. So, for 3 months, I was completely not weight bearing from December, January, February. I was in a boot in a knee scooter, um, which I always say I don't recommend a knee scooter in the wintertime in New York. Just out. Um, and did again a lot of cross training, a lot of relying on the Lord and having faith that it would work out. I did my first steps in March in the boot, then progressed to gym shoe, progressed to doing my first jump in April, competing in May. And I was so far behind my competitors. Like these people had been training from August, September, their new Olympic routines, especially those who knew they were going. And I had to wait on the sidelines and just keep faith that my body was going to heal properly and that I could regain everything and more. And I feel like through all of those tribulations, right, I got a lot more perseverance and I had a lot more faith develop and I had a lot more, um, I'd say, trust in myself and I opened up new doors. I think without this injury, I wouldn't be the person who I am today. I wouldn't have the same outlooks. And also, I became a better athlete. I really did. I became stronger in ways I didn't know I could become stronger. I became um, more like I even gained endurance, believe it or not, in its own way. Not just for like mental endurance, but also physical endurance. And it kind of showed me, especially, going through um this, what's the name? The Pan American Championships where I broke my foot. Might I add, I also didn't train for like 2 weeks before that because I had the flu and bronchitis at the same time,
Oh
and we
my
were in high
God.
altitude when I got there, so it was just a whole mess.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, but yeah, going through that, I finishing that routine, it kind of showed me like really anything is possible,
Hmm.
no
Hmm.
matter what. And I'm gonna keep talking here. I know you probably have questions, but in 2023, the beginning of 2023, before I broke my foot, right, this is January, my cat, her name is Jazzy, was Jazzy, and she couldn't get up. She became paralyzed. Her tail went first, and then it was her hind legs.
Wow.
And we obviously took her to the vet. We didn't know it was wrong. And we took her back. They were like, she's six, like 15 at this point. Like, we could probably do testing, probably shouldn't, right? And so that night, I saw how frightened she was because she couldn't move. And, as an animal, you can't talk. And I prayed and I said, Lord, either take her right now so that she wouldn't be in pain or fear, or let her stand up and walk and give her a good quality of life until the end. And as soon as I finished that prayer, she stood up and walked
Wow.
from not being able to move.
Wow.
And it wasn't like I'm going to go run and jump now. Obviously, it took time for her to realize how to, adapt and stuff. Eventually, she taught herself how to walk without trying to lean on things. She was very ambitious. She was like, I will continue with my normal day-to-day routine. I will learn how to jump again, even though they said she wouldn't, and, keep putting you to sleep. And she was just so perseverant. And so when I broke my foot, I kept thinking back to this moment. And I was like, my cat can do that. So can I. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
she's, the Lord leads through examples and
Hmm.
through people and
Hmm.
important things in your life. And that's something
Hmm.
you can always look back on. And I don't know if this was the direction exactly you were taking, wanted me to go on, but if you have any more questions that are more specific, please let me know and I'll be happy to try to connect it all.
I'm just taken back and just taking everything that you said in because your story is really a testimony. And it's an example of how important having faith in yourself, in something greater than you, in God is for performance, right? Because you were at your lowest when you broke your foot. I'm sure your world came crumbling down, came crashing down. And in those situations, it's like, where do you go? Who do you talk to that can provide the level of comfort and ease mentally that can hold you, right? And that's where that faith comes in. Your story is an example of how important faith is when you are competing and how necessary. I was reading this book that it said that in performance there are six factors, and it's social, environmental, um, I can't remember the other ones. I'll probably try to find it at some other point, but one of them was spiritual. And this is the first time that the spiritual aspect has been brought up on this podcast. So I do really, really appreciate that. And thinking about these larger, high pressure moments, high situations that you're constantly finding yourself in, how do you mentally prepare for those? Right. Like, especially knowing with your foot, or even when you were perfectly healthy, what are some strategies and tools that have helped you?
Yeah, so really quick to just get back on one more point, having that spiritual side develop, it shows you that being an athlete is more than about a result. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I always say. Like I'm sometimes I'll get to talking, especially when I was still in college. And people would be like, "Wait, like 2 months later, you didn't tell me you were an Olympian." And I was like, "I didn't need to." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it gives you a larger purpose to whether, I mean, you look at the Olympics right now in Paris. Um, and so many athletes from all over the world, different countries, were praising God. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just those who succeeded. Those who succeeded obviously maybe got more media coverage,
Yeah.
but even people who didn't achieve the goal that they thought they could achieve or had set for themselves or etc. still said, glory to God, and there's more to my testimony, my story, to the purpose of why I'm an athlete
Mm-hmm.
than just this accomplishment,
Mm-hmm.
whether they achieved it or not. And I think that is so important, especially as a young student and athlete and student
Mm-hmm.
athlete,
Mm-hmm.
um, to recognize why you're doing it and to really love the process as much as the prize, if not more, and just to really hone in on like what your craft is and the skills that it's helping you develop for your life. Um, and then I think to answer your question now, you're talking about mental strategies. So one thing for me is prayer, super, super important. But another thing is my mom hates it when I bring up this quote, but I'm going to do it anyway. There's a Russian quote. It makes more sense in Russian. The
Yeah.
translation's a little wonky, but the premise is So it translates directly to you cannot get enough oxygen before you die.
Mm,
Okay. And the thought behind it is that like once it's go time, you can't possibly get more repetitions in. Like you're
mm,
at the point where you're at, and you just at this point you need to have that trust develop. And you've already done as much as you can do, and you've already put in the work, right? And so at this point, whether it works out or not on stage, you need to have that level of assurance or calmness that you did things right. And as soon as that thought kind of pops into your head with, "Oh, I should have done maybe like 10 more reps like a week ago, that would have," that's the moment where you go, no, you put up this mental barrier. You almost kind of envision a barrier and you push it aside. It's very good. I'm big into visual mental imagery because that's my little like niche in psychology. Because for your listeners, I graduated just now in May with a degree in psychology from Columbia. And while Columbia,
congratulations.
thank you. I took a bit more of a niche in that body brain behavior stuff. So imagining, as soon as a bad thought comes in, you block now is not the time and you kind of push it away mentally, and bring yourself back into that little protected headspace. It's really helpful.
Can I
Um,
ask a quick question about
yeah,
that? So I've heard other people say when you have a because there's kind of two forms of thought. I've uh appreciated the let's stop this thought right now. Let's cut it off at its head and let's, rewire and think about the stuff that I really need to be focusing on and affirmations and empowering myself to move forward. There's another side that says accept that you're thinking about it, right? So it's not like necessarily cut it off, but it's like recognize the thought that you're having and then reframe. They're very similar, right? One's just like stop it right there. The other one is like let's actually explore this thought a little bit more, understand that it has no power over me, and then continue. Just in your research and your background, can you just talk about like is one better than the other? Is one more preferred?
sure. So I think it depends on your personality type because everyone has different personalities. One thing I think the second approach could lead to is mulling. So
Mm,
it's about timing,
mm,
right? So if you're about to go compete, like for me, I wait, we call it on deck. Usually there's a curtain somewhere here. You have like a person in front of you who's going to lead you out onto the stage. It's a lot more performative than maybe something like track and field, right? Where you're
mhm,
already up.
mhm, mhm,
And in that exact moment, it's you have to keep yourself in a very narrow frame of mind, which is go, do, you're ready, right?
mhm, mhm,
In that moment, if a bad thought starts to occur of I'm not, that's when you should cut it off because you have a job to do. It's not
mhm,
appropriate for you to mull it over.
mm,
Whereas maybe if you're in training or a practice competition where you're trying to mimic competition and the thought comes in, or let's say you're still in the back, we call it the back, where you're
yeah,
training or preparing, warming up, right?
yeah,
Um, and that thought comes, that's maybe a good time to be like, okay, I had this thought. It is not applicable right now, nor is it going to give me any sense of reason. And sometimes your anxiety for like, I'm not well prepared enough has sustenance. Like you know what you did and what you do. And that's the most important thing is like building up that confidence in
mhm,
yourself and knowing like I followed the plan.
mhm,
Even if I didn't, I made appropriate adaptations
mhm.
and I'm content with where I'm at right now.
Mm-hmm. 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 I quickly looked up the six factors for performance while you were talking, and it's physical, mental, emotional, social, environmental, and spiritual. And one of the things that you just said is building up that confidence, and that ties to the mental part. How do you build the confidence, or what are ways that, an athlete can continue to build confidence?
Um, I'd say first thing is quality over quantity,
Mm-hmm.
always making sure that when you do something, you don't just do it just to get it over with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when you start to get tired, take a break, give yourself a minute to chill, rest, and then get back into what you're doing. Or if you're starting to get frustrated with something not working, for me, it might be like a throw. It's like I did it 10 times clean yesterday, like no problem. And today it's just not tossing. And so that's a moment of like, okay, I'm gonna take a breath, work on something else, come back to it, right? So being just a little bit more like self-aware in situations. Um, Another thing is that my train left me. So would you mind telling me the
No,
question one more time?
yeah, no worries, no worries. You talked about when you're in the back, right, or you're behind the curtain. It's time for confidence. It's not time to have those negative
Ah,
thoughts.
yes. How do you build
Yeah.
that confidence?
Yeah. So what are
So
some ways that you've built that confidence in that and that to make it work for you?
yeah, another thing is you have to build like a rapport of trust with yourself. And this goes for a skill set to have beyond sport. It's that if no one can take away what you've already done, right? And so if my plan for the day was four routines, let's say with hoop, random example, in training, and I executed those four routines and I was content with those, that means I built a little bit of confidence. Let's say that day I did three routines and I just like felt like a fourth would not be beneficial. I would speak with my coach and be like, "Hey, look, I'm like in a really good spot right now. I feel like a fourth one wouldn't help me." And then we can decide and move forward. That's still an act of building confidence, right? Because you focused on the quality of the work. And let's say you just have an off day and like you're struggling through four, you know that you can reframe your mindset to not just, okay, I had a really rough training and nothing was working, to, hey, I pushed through that and I was capable of pushing through it and managing it, even if it wasn't perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that also builds your confidence. So focusing on, I guess, quality and also the framing of what you've
Mm-hmm.
done is what
Mm-hmm.
helps build that confidence in that for that competition moment of execution.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Reframing the way you think about a quote unquote bad practice or a bad day and pulling out like what are some of the positives that happened in that situation? What are some of the good things that you can think about from that training or that race or that game?
Right. Like my broken foot, right? In
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
in the Pan American Championships.
Mm-hmm.
It was that wasn't great, right? But I pushed through and I kept thinking back in really hard times. It was like, well, you know what? I did it then. I can do it again. And it's just proving to yourself that you can.
Yeah. I want to touch back on something you said at the beginning of the podcast that I really liked about your angry journaling and having that be a way to express all of those emotions that, may not be the most pleasant, but are in us because we're human and that you want to get out. When you find yourselves in slumps, especially mental slumps, how do you get out of that? And how does your journal, the journal play into that?
Yeah. Again, prayer is number one. It's actually really easy when you get into a slump to be very tempted to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
So in a very like open position after a games or a really big life event, a lot of people will go down. They say it's like a little mini depression. I wouldn't call it a depression. I don't like it when people use, actual terms for, but
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
But like I went through a slump, right? And it was
Mm-hmm.
like one of those, I don't feel good about myself, right? But it's like, okay, I don't feel good about myself. Staying in this position isn't going to make me feel any better about myself, even though that's what I really, really want to do. And it's about, at that point, making a decision and then sticking with that decision and going almost against your feeling,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you might feel like you just want to lounge in bed and be upset and mopey just because you feel like it. But after like maybe a day, a couple of hours of that, you're like, okay, like this is actually becoming damaging, right? And it's taking a step and being like, okay, I am going to go move my body for 1 hour, even if it's not the same kind of training I normally do. I'm just gonna go stretch, right? Do some Pilates or something. And then once you get moving, you're like, oh, I actually feel so much better. It's about passing that little bump in
Mm-hmm.
the road.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in terms of journaling, I'd say a good thing to do is roadmaps, finding your why,
Mm-hmm.
finding your purpose, recording good things, recording like what I've learned from an experience. Setting goals is really important. And if we go back to that like angry journaling, I haven't done that in a while, but it's mostly like, just writing out rants. And I feel like as you write out thoughts, you start to realize how silly sometimes you sound. But the most important thing is like between you and your journal, like, or prayer, you and God,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, you have to be honest because
Mm-hmm.
it's very easy to start, especially in this modern day where a lot of our hour, but I think a social trend is to go rant online.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that mentality might even transfer to when people are writing in journals because it's this thought of like, well, someone might see, read, etc. So
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're in like a safe environment, having that like full raw, like here's exactly how I feel right now is super, super helpful. And then as you write, you sort of start to calm yourself down or to find an idea in like the sense of what you want to eventually accomplish. Or even if there's a little bit of helplessness there, you
Mm-hmm.
kind of feel like, well, I've done something about it, so there's something more that I can do about it.
Being honest with yourself is what I like about the journaling and how you described it is it allows you to be completely honest with yourself, right? Because, and being honest with yourself and outside of your mind, because it's easy to talk to yourself, internally, and you go about that throughout the whole day, but having that opportunity and that space to really sit there with your own thoughts and say those things and not be afraid that somebody else is going to see is probably a freeing it you probably feel lighter and free at the end of it because you're being completely and totally honest with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, can I give you a psych trick real quick for
Yeah,
you're listening?
absolutely.
So, um, I'm big into perspective taking. There's first person and third person. All of us have an inner narrative of the way that we talk to ourselves. Well, who can? Not everyone can talk to themselves, actually, fun fact, but for those who can, which is the majority, pay attention to how you talk. Is it, I need to go do my homework, my classes, my et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, we have a, this is the other one. It's not
Hello.
Jazzy. That's her son.
Okay, okay.
Um, and then the other perspective is third person. Is it you need to go do your homework, your classes, etc. And oftentimes talking to yourself in that like you have to do it will actually help stimulate activity. Whereas sometimes the I have to do it makes it feel a whole lot more overwhelming and difficult to approach.
When I talk to myself out loud, I speak in third person and it does feel like it feels just different. So I really feel what you say because it's something that I've experienced in my own life.
It's different neural patterns.
Wow. Wow. Shifting quickly, how do you balance the mental demands of the sport
Uh,
with like other aspects of your life, right? Like you're in school and just all the amazing things that you do. How do you balance them all?
Yeah, so I don't know if I mentioned it already, but I flew almost every week between New York and Chicago, just to set like the stage for people, because I'd spend 2, 3 days in New York, and then I'd spend the rest of the time training in Chicago. And a big part of that was time management, right? Making sure that like I mean, I scheduled my classes to the T of, okay, I'm dedicating these 2, 3 days to literally studies, homework, academia, and then the rest of the days I was a little bit more free mentally to approach sport. But also having routines I think is really helpful, because then you don't have to waste your brain power, I guess, trying to think of what you're going to do next. And I think super, super important for anyone is have that unwind time at
Hmm.
night. Have the time to yourself and with God. For me, it's, and obviously there's days when it just doesn't work out or it's really hard to do it and you're just really tired and then you just do a quick 15 minutes and you're like out. But if you can help it, right, at some point, turn off your electronics,
Hmm.
put them aside. Every night I try to journal 3 things that made me happier that I'm grateful for that I want to remember. I've had, I'm on my eighth year of this.
Wow.
Um, and that helps ground you. And taking time to read something, I spend time with God. I spend time in scripture and praying, and then heading over to sleep. Finding some way to unwind without some kind of stimulation really helps ground you and prepare you for work. And one more thing on that is a built-in version of recovery. So as an
Mm.
athlete, you hear a lot about training, 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 nutrition, recovery, recovery, super important. And you're like, okay, well, what is recovery? Um, Aside from just letting your body rest, maybe doing some like Normatec or some massage or something, Recovery also comes in the form of, I guess, finding time to breathe. And sometimes as athletes, and especially student athletes, you start to feel like recovery is like, I don't have time for it, or it's
Hmm.
wasting my time, or it's being
Hmm.
counterproductive, or maybe I've spent like a little bit of time recovering, but and you start to get worried about it. But you need to try to view recovery as a part of your athleticness, right? Like it's a part of what you're supposed to be doing, and it's active. It's not something that's not building into your work. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. A lot of times athletes view recovery as less important in regards, like in comparison to the physical aspect, right? Because the physical aspect, you're seeing the results. You're seeing, okay, if I'm doing this routine over and over, I'm getting stronger, I'm getting better, I'm lifting, I'm running, et cetera. Whereas the recovery, when you're resting the body, and what I love about what you said is resting the brain, finding a way to be in solitude with self, have a reflection on the day, calm yourself, that then better prepares you for the next day. And that recovery is just as essential as the physical exercise.
Yeah, and honestly, find what works for you. Like I love journaling. Some people I know like can't stand writing or journaling or thinking through. That's not their thing.
Yeah.
Active recovery can look like something like spending time with your friends, carving out like 1 hour to play board games,
Hmm.
you know. Maybe I don't know, taking a walk somewhere or
Hmm.
watercoloring, finding a little hobby or niche that you like. Maybe there's even some like maybe paint by number or like sticker
Yeah.
by number. It's like a new thing. Is your thing, right?
Hmm.
Or building or gone. I don't know. Like
Hmm.
maybe that's just your thing at night. You spend 15 minutes, right? Just
Yeah.
doing that. Like that helps recenter yourself and give yourself that like
Absolutely. Absolutely. It lowers like your cortisol levels, right? Um,
likely I'm not I don't focus on that, but probably.
yeah, yeah. It calms your central nervous system and relax you because when you do have the screens, you're still on alert, right? Um, so, and a reflection question for you: if you could give your high school self advice on the mental side of sport, what would you say?
Well, my high school self had a lot less, I don't know how to put it. She was very to the point. Sometimes I kind of wish I would almost like go back to that.
Mm.
Um, so I'd say if my high school self could give advice to future me,
Ooh, that's different.
or the current me could give advice to like that little blip in between high school and now,
Hmm.
um, I would say don't allow um, other people to impose their fears and inability to see your vision on your goals and your vision. And to, I'd say, to continue having self respect. And that will become evident in its own work.
Wow, wow. And so, how do you, thinking about that, how do you manage internal versus or internal and external expectations?
There was a good Olympic athlete. I don't remember who said it, but I think it was a she, and she was like, I think she was a track and field person too. But it was like expectations and pressure aren't real. Um, they're real in the sense that you feel them, you encounter them, but they're only as strong as you allow them to be.
Hmm.
Um, and this is, I think, where faith comes in, where you know that something is larger than yourself, no matter what, and making sure your identity isn't tied to a number or a result
Hmm.
comes into play.
Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean,
The second part, especially the making sure that your identity isn't tied.
I love rhythmic gymnastics and I grew up in the sport. I want to continue this sport. It is my passion. And yet, my strongest identity lies in Christ and in the fact that I um, am a good friend, that I hope so. um, that I love um, flowers. They make me so happy, and
Mhm,
nature just puts a smile on my face, and that I'm
mhm,
a cat mom. And there's a lot more components to who I am than just a result. And looking back, like maybe even at the Olympics, maybe there was one routine I know I could have done better, right? Um, but then the Olympics kind of ends. You get over it, right? And you're kind of like, that life kind of continues, right?
mhm,
And life
mhm,
is always going to continue and it's not going to wait for you to catch up. So
mhm.
making sure that you are firmly rooted in multiple things that are personally significant to you, whether they are something as small as like, I love my family, right? And they're always going to be there for me. And so will my cats. Or something a little bit larger, like I am a student who is studying to be a psychologist, right? Something like that. I think that gives you a lot more of a support like net to who you are, and it might help you, I think, with mental health in the future.
When I was running track, aiming for the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, my best year was the year when I was also an academic mentor to the UCLA student athletes. And it's because my identity during that time was not solely track and field. I was also serving and doing another area that I was extremely passionate about. And the moment when I think back, when I stopped being an academic mentor and I just really focused on trying to make the Olympics, that's when I noticed it just became 10 times harder because my sole identity was wrapped in that. And I was going to these meets and I was going to these races with this extremely high expectation of myself. Like, you have to do well. If you do not do well, then you're wasting your time chasing this dream. You're sacrificing having a job, you're sacrificing all of these major life events. So, and that pressure just really led to extreme burnout. So, times 100, what you just said of making sure that you have other areas and aspects of yourself and your life that you're continuing to nurture so that your sole identity is not wrapped up in who and what you do in your sport.
Yeah, because let's be honest, sport's going to end at some point, at least on a very high professional, even on a collegiate level, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think when you don't have other things, um, when you don't set things up for yourself, you will have ultimately a lot of a harder time. Now, I don't think sport ever truly ends in that, like, once you're an athlete, you're always an athlete. I think
Absolutely.
it's super important. Like, once you stop competing, whether it's in high school or college or beyond, um, keep working out. The way your heart pumps is different than other
Hmm.
people. The way your
Hmm.
body functions is different than other people. So keep working out.
Hmm.
But that, like, you're going to have to find other things to help supplement who you are. So I 100% say understand what you're saying. And it's very easy to get, again, there's a really good Russian word. I'm not Russian, I just speak Russian, but
Got you.
it's like, I guess it directly translates to like it's cyclical, like where you
Hmm.
almost get hyperfixated, where you get like hyperfixated on something like a performance, right? And then that's where that external pressure builds, which is where I think that track athlete was probably talking about how like pressure isn't really real. It's how much you allow for it to like come in to yourself, right? So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So I do this thing called rapid fire questions where I give you
So
30
bad.
seconds to answer these questions. And I'm gonna put my timer up. And I'll start the clock right after I ask you the first question. What is your go-to pre-game hype song?
Silence.
What's your favorite cheat meal?
I don't know, I don't really do cheat meals.
What's your favorite off-day hobby?
Uh Spending time with my brother, or talking with friends, or playing board games.
If you could relive one moment from your career, what would it be?
Hugging my, I wouldn't relive anything actually, because I think it makes it special by being in the moment.
There we go. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Um, wait. It's never there until it's there.
There we go. There we go.
Sorry, I was trying to, my coach has like a plethora. I was gonna say even a second has time, but I was like, that's not necessarily applicable to everything.
I still appreciate it. I appreciate it. Before we go, is there anything that you would like to say that you feel you didn't have an opportunity to say?
I know. I think being a student athlete, especially when you're like in high school or even younger, is a really big thing. It's a really big deal. And I would like everyone to know that what you're doing is awesome. Keep sight of what is most important to you and take a look at how those skills are developing you into the person that you are. Not just I can run really fast, but hey, I'm actually like really good at leadership, or I'm really determined. I'm very passionate. I love the creativity of my sport. Those little things, they're going to help get you through life. They're great for college applications to really think
Hmm.
about.
Hmm.
And then also beyond, right? For what you want to do with your life post sport.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I know my story didn't have that much linearity to it today. Usually it has a little bit more, but I would be always happy to talk about my experiences.
Nah, I appreciated it. I'm sure everybody that was listening will appreciate it. And we were able to follow despite it being in linear. I think it not being in linear made us actually be there with you instead of just like following along on first you did this and then you did this. So I appreciate your form of storytelling.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.